going to start up a few minutes early, folks, because we ended up with more presentations than we anticipated, which is a great problem to have, but we don't want to go too much over our time. And we're starting today with a song that John Nutting wrote. You may see in the program that the last part of the program is going to be a tribute to John. John started the Peacemakers Breakfast way back in 1987. The last couple of years, it hasn't been at breakfast time, so we're calling it a Peacemakers Gathering. When Grace Church was hosting the annual meeting in '87, John got people together just to talk about peacemaking at the Back Home Cafe. And so it's been going over 30 years. So we're delighted to have you here. And one of John's favorite organizations, favorite things to do was to be a part of Camp About Face and the Vermont Low Income Advocacy Council. He was a songwriter, brought his guitar everywhere with him. And so we're going to warm up by Betty Addison and I are going to sing the Addison County Love Song, which is a favorite. We're going to ask you all to stay muted. And it's a pretty catchy tune. It's one of those songs where the verse and the chorus are all the same tune. So the words were somewhere on the screen.
They're coming.
Okay, thanks, Fred. And so sing along with us as we enter this time of peacemaking. Okay, Betty, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What are we after? The rich and mighty ask. What are we after as we go about our task? What are we after in the bright and sunny light? What are we after in the cold and lonely night?
Well, it's love in the country and love in the town, love in the courthouse and love all around, love in Montpelier and love in the air. We want love in our county and love everywhere. Years and years ago, a great big man did live. He walked around in sandals saying, God above forgives. So everyone can laugh and dance and sometimes even sing. And the sharing of the money makes the people feel like kings.
Well, it's love in the country and love in the town, love in the courthouse and love all around, love in Montpelier and love in the air. We want love in our county and love everywhere. What we are after is a social worker's smile. For a friendly welfare office, we'd go a country mile. What more is there that anyone wants? What is our dream for this corner of Vermont?
Well, it's love in the country and love in the town, love in the courthouse and love all around. Love in Montpelier and love in the air. We want love in our county and love everywhere.
Thank you, Betty.
Thank you, Teresa.
I can't see if anybody was singing along at home, but I hope that you were. I hope you caught on to this wonderful song. Welcome, everyone, to Peacemakers Gathering. Betty's going to start us out with a prayer, and then we'll go right to Kathy Clark for the first presentation. And when it's your turn to present, just unmute yourself. Otherwise, we'll all stay muted.
Hey, please join me in prayer. Gracious God, we gather this afternoon for the 33rd time for the Vermont Conference Annual Peace Gathering. For me, and I know for others, God, it is a very special part of annual meeting, a chance to feel your presence among us as we learn what Vermont churches, small and large, are doing in response to your call for us to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with you every day of our lives. Let us rejoice in these efforts and as well feel challenged by them to push to do more, open always to your guidance as we do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Hi, I'm Kathy Clark, and I'm pastor at the Federated Church of East Arlington. And this past year, as so many congregations were trying to figure out, what do we do? How can we help people? We at the Federated Church of East Arlington heard about COVID money that was available, the federal COVID money. And because we're part of the Hunger Council, Bennington County Hunger Council, and that's how we heard about it. And so we were fortunate enough, we partnered with our friends at the Battenkill Valley Health Center, which is a federally qualified health center, and the Collaborative, which is out of Londonderry, but serves the northern half of Bennington County. And what we did was we put a grant together to create COVID care kits. And those kits, what you're seeing now is a picture of our garage here at the church. Normally my car is parked in there in the winter, but this year for the first half of the winter, the supplies came there. We were awarded $10,000 we originally asked for 20, we got 10, which we were thrilled with. And what we were able to do is create 350 COVID community support kits that had a host of different items in them. And I don't see as one of the pictures there. So I can tell you some of the things that went into them. They included a fleece blanket, hats, gloves, a thermometer, masks, hand sanitizer, shampoo, soap, cleaning supplies, toothbrush, toothpaste, all that kind of stuff, and flashlight with batteries. And all of that was in a bag that was packed by a number of volunteers. You could go to the next slide. And what we did was we used a second building we have here on our campus, Dunlap Hall, and all the supplies went in there, and we were able to create the 350 bags and then 150 supplements. And the idea was that these bags were specifically to be targeted to our neighbors that were 65 and older, the most vulnerable, we hoped, and or had a disability, living with a disability. They could be younger and with a disability. And so what we did was we had a number of volunteers pack the bags, and you can go to the next one and you'll see kind of you'll see get the idea. Those are the bags. And the way we were able to distribute them is we had two separate drive up days in which people drove. We announced a time and spread the word, and people drove up and we put the bag safely in their car. And you can go to the next slide and then you could get an idea of some of our volunteers getting ready to do that. And so we were able to get a lot of them distributed that way, but we found ourselves with even more left. And this was kind of coinciding with when 65-year-olds and older were starting to get vaccinated. So what we did was we partnered with the health department again, and they every week one of their staff members came and picked up some bags and took them up to the vaccination clinic that was happening at Burr and Burton, the high school in Manchester. Additionally, Battenkill Valley Health Center gave them out to patients that they had there that fit the criteria. And eventually, within about a month to 6 weeks, we were able to distribute all 350 of the original kits and the 150 supplements to folks. It was definitely seen as folks certainly appreciated knowing that someone was thinking about them. We also worked with folks who were homebound and tried to get those were brought to them by our friends at the Home Health and Hospice Agency that serves our community. And so many of them were delivered to folks that way. And as a result of that, we knew we wanted to continue doing something to serve our community during COVID. And so when that ended, about the time that was ending or getting close to ending, we're tapped to be the Everyone Eats location for the middle of Bennington County. There's a program in Manchester and a program in Bennington, and we were the mid-county site where we currently every week we go and pick up 75 meals from a restaurant, most of the time in Manchester. And those are then people come and have signed up for them and drive up every week to pick up those meals. And the idea behind Everyone Eats, which originated in Brattleboro, is that it is an opportunity to support local restaurants, to support local growers, and to be a way that folks who could benefit from a meal would get fed. And that was, for us, that was really important because we are also the senior meals site for this neck of the woods. And they've been delivering meals using our garage, again, that same garage as their pickup drop-off location for Meals on Wheels. But a lot of that kind of, some folks fell through the cracks. So this is another additional way to help those folks and some other folks. There's no income eligibility for Everyone Eats. The idea is truly that everyone eats, all the growers, the producers, the restaurant folks, and citizens. So we are excited that that program is continuing, and the plan is for it to continue through June. And we're grateful for the partnerships that enabled us to make this happen. And I would, anybody needs to be in touch with me, feel free to email me if there's anything I mentioned today that might be of help to you or your congregation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. All the presenters' contact information is being put into the chat as they present. So that's great. Thank you, Jackie, for doing that. And next up is Lori, who can unmute herself.
Hi, I'm Lori Cruz, minister at the Second Congregational Church in Londonderry, Vermont, and I am going to share with you about the Neighbors Pantry, which is a ministry of the church I serve, before COVID and after. So here we go with the screen sharing. Okay, can you all see that? Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. So the Neighbors Pantry of London, Second Congregational Church, UCC, Londonderry, Vermont. The building the pantry is in a small building across the parking lot from the church. Built in 1840 as a Methodist church. So the pantry is actually in a part of the church that was, a part of the building that was the parsonage for the Methodist church. And the Neighbors Pantry started in the 1980s when Magic Mountain, a local ski area, closed down. A lot of folks needed food. Todd Farnsworth, who some of you may remember, was the person who started Neighbors Pantry. So we own the building. The church owns the building, maintains the building. The volunteers are from the church that I serve, the Baptist Church in South Londonderry, Old Parish, which is a Methodist church in Weston, Vermont, and then some local folks who just like to feed people. I wanted to put this shot in there so that you could see the church just across the parking lot from the edge of the pantry. That's a key component of why it's such an important ministry of our church, is it's just the parking lot. The Neighbors Pantry gets most of its food from the Vermont Food Bank. We also purchase food locally at cost from the local grocery store, which is great. And then particularly since the pandemic, but even beforehand, a large number of donations from local people. They can drop off food in the side entrance of the church. There's also a Neighbors Pantry drop box in our local grocery store. And people, of course, donate money, which allows us to buy food very inexpensively from the food bank. And again, from the local grocery store at cost. This is a quick snapshot of the pantry before COVID. We used to distribute food on the third Friday of each month. And from 1 to 4 o'clock, people could come and it would be self-selecting. That's pretty important because it's no longer self-selecting since the pandemic. You can see a cart there. If you were one person, you'd get 1 bag on a cart. If you were 2 people, you get 2 bags. 3 people or more, you get a banana box, and you just literally, it's like going shopping for free. You just fill up the bags or the boxes with whatever you wanted. And COVID strikes. Immediately shifted to the first and third Fridays of each month in order to feed folks who were hungry. We continued with emergency distributions. If people couldn't make Friday 1 to 4, of course, we make food available. We also deliver once a month to the apartments, 17 of the 24 apartments at Smith Haven, which is a low-income and elderly housing complex in South Londonderry. We have since 2014 done a backpack program with our local elementary school, which I'm going to speak about later in this presentation. You can see the drive-through only sign when you pull into the church parking lot now for distribution. This sign greets you. And then this is what distribution looks like for drive-through. You pull in, you check in under the white tent, and then we run out and put 4 bags in your car. This is the latest iteration of the 4 bags. We got smart and made it color-coded so the volunteers could quickly look in and make sure everyone got what they needed to get. We do pre-prepared bags, which of course is different than self-selecting. The disadvantage is that if you don't like something like canned carrots, you still get them. But the good news is we haven't missed a beat in terms of providing food since the pandemic started, which we feel really good about. So everyone gets 2 bags of what we call regular bags or shelf-stable bags. You can see pasta in there. Toilet paper, as you may recall, was critical at the beginning of the pandemic. These are all shelf-stable items, canned food, that kind of thing. Perhaps not the healthiest, but certainly calories if you're hungry. So every family gets 2 of those. You can see some of the bags we prepared. At the beginning in March, April, and May of the pandemic, we were serving 3 times the number of our usual clients. In 2013, in April, we served 145 families, and we served 400 families in April of 2020. So, and it's a lot more work on the front end making up the bags, as you can imagine. We staged bags in the church. Again, it's just right across the parking lot. We don't do that now, but at the beginning of the pandemic, we wanted to be certain that the volunteers were far away from each other. So that was a good use of the church. At each distribution, people get 2 pre-prepared bags plus a bag of vegetables, 5 or 10 pounds of potatoes and carrots and onions, sometimes apples, melon, whatever we can get from the food bank and/or is donated. We also, each person, you saw the gray plastic bag, each family gets fresh and frozen items, eggs and cheese, sometimes yogurt. We had a local person donate a cow, thankfully already slaughtered and packaged for us. So we got just shy of 400 pounds of ground beef. So we've been giving out 2 pounds of ground beef to each family twice a month, which is just great. In the beginning of the pandemic, we got donations from the Vermont Country Store when the local inns and hotels shut down, as they had to shut down early, as you might recall. We got a lot of cereal and yogurt and stuff from them. We got 135 pounds of fudge from the Vermont Country Store, which was really delicious. I only ate about, well, not even 100 pounds of it. Anyway, and then a local person donated, made for probably 4 months, 30 loaves of homemade white bread, sliced and double bagged every other week, so that the backpack people and everyone who came to the pantry at least once a month got a loaf of homemade bread, which was just terrific. We also saw a tremendous influx of funds. In June of 2020, an anonymous donor gave a $3,000 challenge grant. We raised that in 8 days. So the donor increased the challenge to $5,000. And in the course of 24 days, we raised $17,000 for the Neighbors Pantry, which was great. We were buying a lot more food, so we needed the money, but it was just tremendous. The community support was tremendous. We were the recipients of extra food from the Farm to Families program, which the state was running and the National Guard was distributing. At one of the distributions here in Londonderry, 30 people didn't show up. So we had 60 gallons of milk we had to find a home for, so that we were able to hand that out at a distribution also. We created a Facebook page. We never had one before. We didn't need it. But now that's been tremendous because we can let people know what we need. We can alert new people to the community about the Neighbors Pantry and when our distributions are. And then folks can inquire, of course, about helping or donating food or finance. Backpack program. Teresa suggested that I focus on things that other churches might be interested in starting, or a way to kind of get into food distribution and food ministry. We started our backpack program in 2014. And I should say the local elementary school educates young people between kindergarten and 8th grade. So it's quite a broad range of ages. It serves 3 towns. And in the beginning, it was a real life backpack. We would bring food up to the nurse, peanut butter, pasta, that kind of stuff, tuna fish. And she would put that food into backpacks, which were all different, so that when the kids got on the bus, they were just carrying an extra backpack. It made it very anonymous. Then we shifted to us preparing the backpacks, and I would bring them up to school every Friday, which I loved because I got to go into the school, occasionally see a teacher I knew or kids that I knew, wave to the principal. It was a really good way to be in the community and certainly serving. Then when the pandemic struck, we shifted to these paper bags. And the bad news is that people have to come and get them now. But the good news is way more food than can go in a backpack is what we're giving to each family. This is every Friday, not twice a month, but every Friday. You can see kid-friendly food, granola bars, juice, this manna of life, mac and cheese, canned vegetables, pasta, of course, peanut butter. In the spring, when the pandemic first hit, we would bring the backpacks up to the school. There were 19, which was more than we'd ever done. And again, it was these paper bags, leave them outside the school. And then as people came to pick up their kids, they would grab them. And then in the summer, when school shut down, the school made the decision to deliver lunches to everyone who wanted them all summer. So then the number dropped to 16, but we would bring these, again, these paper bags, backpack bags up to the school every Friday, and they would go out with the lunches that got delivered. So that was great because we were getting a lot of food out into the community. Then in the fall, we switched to backpack bags being picked up at the church, which is the situation now. Those are some of them in the side entrance. Folks come any time between Friday and Tuesday and just grab their bag and then they go home. We're working with 2 other local support agencies, an organization called Neighborhood Connections. They're the distribution site for our Everybody Eats program. We put an Everybody Eats flyer in the backpack bags every week just to remind folks they can get food there also. And we're working with the Stratton Foundation. They received a lot of money from COVID, and they have a dental program. So we put a bag with some dental care, toothbrush, toothpaste in every backpack bag. And occasionally the Stratton Foundation gives us $100 gift cards for Price Chopper. There's one in Manchester, which is about 15 minutes away. And so the backpack recipients receive those on occasion too. It's been hard work, it's been rewarding, and it's been a joy. And I'm probably closing in on 10 minutes. So if you have any questions, contact me. I have been more involved in the pantry than ever since the COVID, but it's also been a delight to have a tangible thing to do in this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lori. Alyssa May is next.
I'm going to start my timer so I know how I'm doing here. It's a pleasure to be with you all, and I appreciate the invitation from Teresa and the folks who have organized Peacemakers to just talk with you a little bit about some things that are similar to what Lori and the folks at Second Congregational in Londonderry are doing, but our food ministry as it relates to a new community partnership, which was one of the great joys for me and for our congregation in this time of COVID. Many of you recognize that this has been a time of enormous challenge, and the both and is that it's also been a time of enormous possibility. And so that's where we have found ourselves in this last year, at the intersection of both of those things. Several months ago, I was listening to a program that the UCC National was doing, and it was a conversation between our general minister and president and one of the bishops of AME Zion Church. And Bishop Moore said in the time of COVID, his experience was that churches were either expanding or contracting. And I was cleaning my office at the time while I was listening, but I promised I was paying attention. And I thought, well, I think that's actually really true. So I have the privilege to be the pastor of the Orleans Federated Church. Generally in worship, we're between 17 and 25 people. There's probably 40 active people. And there's probably about 15 people who are able-bodied and have enough free time to be able to contribute regularly to the life and the ministry of the church. We had a 30-year history of a shop your own pantry, much like Second Congregational, that was operating twice a month. Beginning the second week of COVID, that started operating weekly. Beginning late spring of COVID, we went from a twice a month food pantry opportunity to a twice a week food distribution ministry that has happened now for the last 13 months, with great thanks to 6 of my 10 able-bodied people who are able to make that happen. Part of this came about because I was quite frustrated early on in the pandemic and was pretty vocal about that, in that our independent food pantry had never been affiliated with the Vermont Food Bank. And when it became clear to us that the needs of our community in the heart of the kingdom were going to increase probably exponentially, I was in a meeting with some other community partners, and the food bank said, well, if you're not a current partner, we can't extend food to you, and we're not taking partners at current. And I thought, well, okay, so that's going to be a little tricky for some of us. I know that that's a wonderful working relationship for a lot of people, but at that moment, we were kind of a little bit stuck. And after this meeting, a colleague reached out and said, hey, I think we should have a conversation. And that was Catherine Cusack, and she's the executive director of Green Mountain Farm to School, which is a mission-driven organization that's based in Newport, Vermont, and has been known for a number of things, one of which is the Lunchbox, which is a free food truck that drives around the Northeast Kingdom and delivers meals in central locations to any kid 18 or under. Without any questions asked, you just walk up and they hand you lunch. Which I just thought was about the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So I had been with my son several summers, and Catherine said, we're in a position that we need to be aligning our opportunities with the current situation. So historically, they provided a conduit. They were a mission-driven conduit from local farmers and food producers to larger organizations, colleges, universities, school systems, restaurants. And of course, by March 17th, most of those places were shut down entirely. So they have been an integral partner in this period of time, and an opportunity for us as an organization to reach out, to have visibility with another community partner that has a great deal of visibility, is mission driven, and is providing resources to us and income to our neighbors. So from my perspective, it's a win-win-win-win. And in some of the ways that we have worked with them in the past year are to initially to provide supply chain for our food shelf when the traditional supply chain was breaking down, as I think Lori mentioned. They were able to come through with produce, milk, and eggs immediately, delivered to the church by a lovely guy who would wheel it right in and drop it off in the kitchen for us. That evolved as it became clear that our local supervisory union was not going to be able to support summer meals. With the help of Green Mountain Farm to School, we were able to become a summer meals site for 3 weeks in this past summer, and handing out multiple meals at every one of those events. That also evolved into becoming a distribution site for the Farmers to Families boxes, which was just, what an amazing experience that was, to see the produce and the dairy coming in and then going back out to people who said, you mean I'm supposed to take both? Because it was a 10-pound dairy box. When was the last time you got that many blocks of Cabot cheese at once? So that was super. That then transitioned into some special holiday grant money that they had, a grant that went directly to our food shelf that we could order against for eggs, milk, carrots, potatoes, apples, beef jerky, and a number of other things that folks were happy to receive. And as a result, we've been able to provide basically fresh produce and fresh food every week, and dairy to the folks who are using the food shelf capacity. That extended into a holiday grant program where we were able to work with some local bakers to provide Christmas cookies. We did a special holiday gift box for all the folks who were participating in our food shelf at that moment. And that then transitioned into the Everyone Eats program, which we've been able to support now as a location since December. Whew, it's a lot, my friends. It's an awful lot, but I will tell you that I think some really wonderful things have come for me and for our congregation out of this. One is, again, the recognition, and I won't get the quote right, that a small group of committed people can get a whole heck of a lot done. And the second is that there are lots of folks out there who want to work with other mission-driven organizations. And so I would encourage you to look around. I would never have imagined that our partnership with this organization would be so fruitful and so fun and so life-giving. And, we're now the people they call first when there's something going on, when they've got more money, when they've got a new opportunity, when they need a location for something, we're the go-to. And that, to me, feels like an incredible blessing to come out of this really, really hard time. I'm going to put their website into the chat right there and share that with you all. Nope, I didn't do that. That's the booklet. Everybody's already got that. You don't need that. You need this. Hang on one second. You'd think after 14 months of Zoom, I would be better at this, but considering I just figured out last week how to put my own hand down in a meeting, I guess we'll take the Luddite opportunities where they come. So I would just close by saying that, most of us, even with our small congregations, even with our half-time weary tech challenged pastors, can do just an incredible amount of good and outreach. And we are so grateful for the visibility that has brought to our small church, to the sense of purpose, to the sense of mission, and to the greater contribution to the kingdom, not just the Northeast Kingdom, but to the kingdom, as we like to speak about in our tradition. So thanks very much for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Alyssa. We have another Northeast Kingdom pastor coming on. That's James Merriam.
Thank you, Teresa. This has been wonderful to be a part of, and I will spare repeating so much of what the just wonderful litany of things that I'm hearing and hearing described. And it's also especially wonderful to come right after Alyssa, of course, because by Northeast Kingdom standards, Orleans and Newport are right next to each other. It's not so close by actual drive time, but they're wonderful neighbors of ours. And I'm starting off by also talking about Green Mountain Farm to School, but from kind of the opposite perspective, because Green Mountain Farm to School is right down the street from us, like almost next door. And it's been a long running, like years going back, of if there are two organizations in Newport that can reliably get something done, that can reliably help out people who are in need when they need it, it's been us and them. But we've kind of stayed in our own silos because it just didn't overlap. We're always looking for ways to partner, always looking for things to do together. And we came up with a few, but it was a help. We were a good location for things if they just need a little more space. They're just nice folks. My wife worked there for a little while, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but it was that the sort of cordial neighborhood relationships that we were just had developed over this years, this level of trust, this level of just reliability with one another. All of a sudden, in the span of just, in a couple of cases, a day or two, that turns into a huge neighborhood contribution and community contribution. And I will say beyond that, when we first heard about COVID lockdown, when we very first heard about what was going to be happening, what we imagined and what we prepared, actually that's both Farm to School and the United Church, what we prepared to be ready for was not what happened at all. And we had volunteers coming out of the woodwork right at the very beginning, wanting to help out in one way or another. And then at first, nothing happened. But as time went on, the partnerships that really mattered, the people who could really rely on one another, and most significantly, the relationships that had been built up before the pandemic. The relationships we built up kind of without any real idea of what we were going to do together. Just people we knew, we knew there could be an opportunity in the future, and this is it. Here it is. So at the United Church of Newport, we've had for a long time a big food shelf, of course, being one of the food bank partnered locations. Of course, that relationship, that trustworthiness, that opportunity to really take advantage of how they've really stepped up in the pandemic. And I recognize it's difficult because of not taking on other partners, but to be a hub for distribution and to step into and lean into new things that were going on. Before the pandemic, I had gone to quite a lot of effort and gotten a new program where we also distributed food through the high school. But with the high school closed, that shut down overnight. So it was that a whole feeding ministry just disappeared. But at the same time, we were able to reconfigure things really, really quickly to hand food out of a window in a very convenient location, while the main social service organization in downtown really couldn't pivot that quickly. And we were able to have our basically custodial staff, who didn't really need to clean up after the events that weren't happening anymore, pivoted more towards working with the food shelf. And that it was the people who could really step up when it really mattered. And it took some time, of course, to find the places that people fit in, the slots that people came into. So of course, the food bank, the local grocery stores that have sort of, if I'm going to be entirely honest, sort of under the table helped us out for quite some time. When it really mattered, when they knew it was going to make a really big difference in people's lives, that not only continued but stepped up. And I would throw out one more thing that I was really not expecting, but that has been a great service as it's turned out. The sort of traditional format, not only that we used to use, and I've heard a couple of other people saying they had to abandon their food shelf format. So we had to change ours a little bit, but that created far greater accessibility because we went from more or less a 2-day sort of festival atmosphere to a 5 days a week availability, which is a lot better for a lot of folks. And we were able to hop into a position to allow other organizations to readjust their formats as well. We were already a big place for blood drives, but with the sort of small format, really easy to distance everyone, small setting blood drive, the Red Cross wanted to step those up very significantly. And so it's been really funny. The church's calendar that used to be full of events is now full of everyone eats and blood drives, and that's it. But we're still doing an incredible amount because of just recognizing that it's not what we imagined we'd be doing. It's not what we used to be doing, but it's things that work especially well just because of where we are, who we have, what we have, and what has just worked. So I guess I encourage, and I'm glad to have this resource, like resource sharing and these ideas, but it's sort of don't fight what works, and just be so grateful for the relationships you made, for the relationships you built, and for the people who, as my title said, really came through in the clutch. So thank you to Green Mountain Farm to School. Thank you to the food shelf coordinators at the United Church of Newport. And it's so great, especially, I just have to repeat how wonderful it was to hear Alyssa speak about them from that other direction, and all these sort of similar relationships just really coming through all the way across the street, all the way across the state. So just God bless everyone. This is just wonderful. And thank you, Teresa, for organizing. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, James. These presentations were a real example of how COVID has enabled us to really be the church, step up being the church. We're moving from
Amen.
presentations about how we responded during the pandemic into some presentations about migrant justice, and then also several presentations about racial justice. So next up are Mary Chin and Eleanor Zhu from the First Congregational Church of Thetford, and you may unmute yourselves.
Thank you. I can't see Eleanor Zhu.
Oh, you can't?
Oh, there you go. Hi, Eleanor.
Hi.
Okay, so we're in the First Congregational Church of Thetford, which sits on the Connecticut River. So we are, depending, 5 minutes away from being in the state of New Hampshire. And a number of things that we will be sharing with you have been collaborative projects involving congregations on both sides of the river. Yes, and so I am going to ask that you start the video.
Okay, I'm ready to go here. Ready? Is this the right one? It looks like.
It's the right one. You got the sound?
Oh, sorry. Whoops. I just realized I need to do something about the sound. Sorry about that. I'm going to stop share and then come back in just a minute. I forgot about the sound.
Good. When you go to share, just on the left at the bottom, it
Yes.
says share. Yep.
Yeah, I remember that now.
Administration established the U.S.
I'll go back to the
Tolerance-
beginning here.
Sherry Merrick.
We are members of the First Congregational Church of Thetford, and we're also on the Executive Council of the United Valley Interfaith Project, which is now affiliated with VIA. Here are some of the concerns that our church has been working on.
When the Trump administration established the U.S. zero tolerance policy that separated children and families in the U.S.-Mexican border, we put together a series of programs. We filled our meeting house for a forum discussion on the new policy. Our discussion leaders included an immigration expert from Senator Leahy's office, Congressman Peter Welsh, Dartmouth professors, immigration lawyers, and a child psychologist. We raised $1,000 for a nonprofit agency that promotes justice by providing free and low-cost legal services to underserved immigrant children, families, and refugees. We presented 4 Sunday nights of videos and speakers on immigration. The daughter of one of our church members spoke on her graduate research with migrants on the U.S.-Mexican border a few months later. In July 2019, we co-sponsored a rally attended by 500 people on the Dartmouth College Green as part of the Lights for Liberty nationwide protest against child detention centers. We raised over $2,100 for 3 immigration organizations.
Together with UVIP members, we have made large signs addressing these kinds of concerns. The signs were held at the Immigration Justice Rally on the Dartmouth Green, and there are also road signs addressing immigration, racial justice, as well as voting, and also warning drivers of Border Patrol checkpoints, which have been held in our area. We also have been working to get with Migrant Justice to get the Hannaford's store to sign on with Milk with Dignity, as well as working to get fair and impartial policing policies passed. We attended many Hartford Select Board meetings where they were debating this, and also a member of our group worked to get this passed in Lebanon as well. We are now working to bring fair and impartial policing to Thetford at our next town meeting for a vote.
At our church, we had a photo exhibit. Jorge Carlos Alvarez, a friend of a church member, gave us this photo exhibit. Look at me in the eyes, to put a face on the people below the Mexican border wall. He lives in the Yucatan Peninsula, and these are the folks from his community, many indigenous, not Spanish speaking, who have migrated there to find work. This exhibit is available to be shown in other communities.
And the UVIP Immigration Support Network has been helping asylum seekers, a number of them, including a family of 4. After 1 year, the parents made their full asylum application 186 pages long. And today, both parents finally have received work permits. Also, last spring, we joined with a national group folding paper cranes in memory of those Japanese Americans who were detained in camps during World War II, and in solidarity with those migrants today who are being held in detention camps. We folded 2,500 paper cranes. That's one for each person who lives in the town of Thetford. When George Floyd was killed, we held a racial justice vigil on our common in honor of all of those who have been killed, detained, imprisoned, and deported because of their race. We thought maybe a dozen folks might show up since we'd only advertised this rally for 3 days. 250 people came. This is our town showing up for justice. So we all set?
We are, Mary, did,
So that covers a span of time. More and things like the folding suru for solidarity. We were going to go to Washington, D.C. with our 2,500 paper cranes, but COVID canceled that. So there's a number of things that have changed because of COVID. But our church recently held a book group reading and discussing the book by Rhonda McGee called The Inner Work of Racial Justice. And we have had a relationship for a few years with the Community Baptist Church of Englewood, New Jersey, which is an African-American church. They have come up to visit with us, and last year a group of us went down to visit with them. I think this was pre-COVID. Yes, and this is also a collaboration with the Congregational church that is 10 minutes away on the New Hampshire side of the river. So this kind of collaboration is something that we've done pretty often, especially with our connections with the United Valley Interfaith Project, which soon will be overseen by the Vermont Interfaith Action and the Granite State Organizing Project. So we're going to still try to collaborate, but we will be centered more in our 2 states. And just last week, a group of us in the church watched the Henry Louis Gates series on public broadcasting about the history of the Black church, and then had a discussion group about that as well. And now I shall pass this on to Eleanor Zhu.
Okay,
So this has to do with some listening sessions that we have been doing. These have been organized and catalyzed by Vermont Interfaith Action. Ryan Page, who's the Upper Valley community organizer for VIA, has been helping us to put together meetings of people in our church, mainly some community members in small groups, to listen deeply to concerns and find out how we can decide what needs our attention and our energies in our community and in the broader Upper Valley community. So we've had six listening sessions with groups of, say, 3 to 8 people in a group. There's a leader and a recorder in each, and we go around our group with a question that has to do with our favorite meal or what makes us feel at home, something that binds us in community together. And then a question like, what keeps you awake at night? And we've had some interesting and deeply felt responses, a great range of things, as you can imagine. But the hope is to put these together in a summary and go to a gathering of the whole Upper Valley faith communities that have been participating in this project and share what we've had for themes and see where our themes may have common threads with other churches and faith communities, so that the VIA and the GSOP, which is what, Granite State, something or other, outreach project or something, I made that up, can put energy into some real projects that make a difference in the Upper Valley. So it's been a wonderful way to understand better what our own congregation's concerns are, and now we get to see how we can relate our church's energies with those of other churches and really make a difference in the Upper Valley. So I guess that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Eleanor. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Whoops, I'm gonna mute myself.
The listening sessions are how a church begins its participation with Vermont Interfaith Action. And I see Debbie Ingram just put something in the chat about what that organization is you were talking about. Thank you. Our next presentation is a joint presentation between Grace Church in Rutland and Bethany Church in Randolph. And so I'm going to ask Michelle Fountain, Ellen Green, and Wendy Ross to unmute themselves.
Hello. Hi. My view is funny here, but we'll just let it go. Michelle, I'm Ellen. Michelle emailed me and said that her glasses broke and she is at the ophthalmologist or optometrist and may not be able to join us. So we're just going to go ahead and I will start the screen sharing. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Ellen. Good to see you. We made
it.
Yes.
So the two of us would like to welcome you to what we are doing for asylum seeker support in Vermont and let you know that there are ways that you can be involved as well. Bridge to Rutland started at Grace Church as a learning community class studying what was happening on the border, and it has grown to 8 faith communities, the NAACP, Castleton Indivisible, and the remnants of the group who worked with the
Georgia Miller.
The remnant of the group that worked with the Syrian refugees. And we are now a nonprofit 501c3 housed at Grace Church, but that's where we started. This is our website. If you go on it, you can get the latest news. You can get our volunteer handbook, our structure, our history, how you can sign up, etc.
Would you like to let me see the slides, please?
Is this not screen sharing?
I'm not seeing it.
Is everybody else seeing it?
No, it's not sharing.
Oh, well, you could have told me that first. Sorry. Let me try again. I am so sorry. So yell at me because this is not my forte, but okay, there is, wait a minute. There's our first one. That's the two groups. Here's the second one. That's our website. You might want to write it down. I am so sorry. That man, by the way, is someone on the Mexican border, and in the picture is his daughter, who was taken away from him when they came across into the US. And now we're to Wendy. Sorry.
And there are our wonderful Wales Tales in Randolph. I just want to tell you a little about how Randolph area Asylum Seekers support started. We had a Bethany Church in Randolph, had a joint meeting with the library 2 years ago and talked about immigration and heard from Erin Jacobson, who is the lawyer at Vermont Law School, and decided that we needed to do something. And two groups came out of that meeting. Our group, who were intent on working toward hosting an asylum seeker in our community, and another group that Betty Edson was involved with, supporting local residents who were from away, especially Latinos. Unfortunately, COVID hit, and so their side of the program didn't come to as much fruition as we had hoped. Shall we go to the next slide, Ellen?
Yes. So this was actually Michelle's slide. She has done a little bit work with the migrant group in the state. And I know that the folks before us talked about the campaign with Hannaford for Milk with Justice. But we want to make sure you understand the definition. So a migrant worker is someone who usually comes without documentation and does seasonal work. A refugee, like the Syrians who came to Rutland, are a group of people from a country they are designated by the UN to be refugees. And so they come with the backing of the State Department and money and the ability to have a job, and then they have to pay that off. And did you want to talk about an asylum seeker, Wendy?
Sure. Asylum seekers are people who are fleeing trauma of some kind in their own country. Sometimes it's gangs, sometimes it's abject poverty, sometimes it's community oppression because they may be lesbian, gay, or something like that. But they cannot claim asylum until their feet are on US soil. And so many of them come legally to ports of entry. And once they get across, they declare that they are in need of asylum. I just want to back up a little and tell you that I was fortunate enough several years ago to go down to a program which is still going on the border called Border Links. And it's an educational program which teaches you about why migrants are coming here, why are asylum seekers coming here. And I remember two things I wanted to mention to you, which really struck me. One was that I went to a town called Nogales. Nogales is a town that is a double town. Half of it is in the US and half of it is in Mexico. And that is the place where people who are deemed not worthy of not having enough reason to be admitted here are sent back. And to see those people sitting around the town square, having been sent back and not knowing how they're going to get home because they don't have any money, they spent it all trying to get here, is so heartrending. And another place that we went to was I've forgotten the town, I don't do names, but in Mexico, where people gathered who were trying to cross the desert. You will have heard about the desert, where thousands and thousands of asylum seekers and migrants have died. And at the beginning of the desert, where I have stood, is this huge cross with all these names on of people who have lived in the desert, and white vans where like 20 or 25 people have paid a coyote to get them across. How on earth they get so many people in a white van, I don't know. I can still to this day not look at a white van and not remember those people. And so that is what is motivating me and motivating the group that we have in Randolph and motivating Ellen and her group in Rutland. And just I want to add that there are 5 groups in Vermont doing this work. And once a month, we all, oh, thank you for the slide. We all have a meeting to support each other and answer each other's questions and talk about what we are doing, how far we have gotten in the process. There is also a group in Northern New Hampshire that is associated with us. This group of affiliated folks is called the Vermont New Hampshire Asylum Seekers Network. And we want to be sure that you know that across this state, there are these 5 groups. And if you live close to one of these areas and you are interested in helping out, you can contact them. We can let you know how to get a hold of them. There's one group in Montpelier called the Central Vermont Refugee Action Network. The group in Keene, New Hampshire is called Project Home. Ours in Randolph is called Randolph Area Asylum Seekers Support. Ellen has told you about Bridge to Rutland. The group that started and motivated all of us is called CASP, which is, I can't remember. Ellen, what does CASP stand for?
Community Asylum Seeker Project, and it's in Brattleboro.
Right. And there's also one in St. Johnsbury. So this is a group not solely connected with churches, but certainly a lot of it is.
So I'd like to talk about our 2 partners. The first one is the Keno Border Initiative, and the town that Wendy mentioned, Nogales, has programs on both sides of the border. And actually 2 days ago, I got a phone call from the person who is hoping to come to Rutland to be sponsored. He's very excited because they are going to be doing another one of their protests on the border called #SaveAsylum.org. And if you want more information, it's going to be a Zoom thing that you can get into. It's next Friday. Contact me, but he's actually going to speak there. And that's pretty exciting that we'll actually be able to see him. I've only ever talked to him on the phone. The other group that we've worked with, and this is the little green hands holding up a family, is the Good Shepherd Church. It's a UCC church, also in Arizona, very close to Nogales, but they're in Saruaita. And they, on the American side, and they have done a lot in the desert in terms of taking water, taking food, helping to rescue people. So what's happening on the border now? Well, you can read the news and all of that, but there's some questions that have come up to us. If there are so many people crossing the border, why don't we have anyone in asylum yet? So the quick answer is asylum is pretty well messed up at this point. Not everybody operates under the same laws, even though the law is out there. But because of the previous administration, it's pretty messy. Second is that we're working with people in Arizona, and a lot of children are coming across there, but the governor has said that children can't leave Arizona, that they need to stay there. And the children who come across are usually because they have family somewhere near that area. The scary thing that's happening at the border is a lot of these children are put into huge detention centers, but they can't call them detention centers. So they're, I don't remember what they call them, foster homes, but they're not. They're gigantic with hundreds of kids. And once a child turns 18 on their 18th birthday, they are taken out of the safe, which it isn't terribly safe in those facilities, they're put into the adult facilities, which also are not safe. So the Save Asylum project from Keno Border Initiative is really important and needs our support. Anything else on the border you wanted to say, Wendy?
I just wanted to add, and I'm not sure if it's on the latest slide or not, that when a family or a single person comes across the border and says, I am in need of asylum, the first thing that they have to do is have what is called a credible fear interview, in which they have to persuade a judge who is very busy and doesn't have much time in a very short time why they need asylum. There are different criteria, but if they pass that credible fear interview, then they are sent to a detention center. These are adults I'm talking about. And the detention centers are like prisons, and a person can have to stay there until their day in court, which can be 2 years away or more. What we are doing is trying to be hosts to people so that during that period, we can give them a home and a sense of community and a sense of safety. And we're going to tell you a little more, I think, on the next slide as to the things that we are actually doing.
So sorry, I'm hearing one of the people from B2R giving me a phone call in the other room, but I'll get the message later. How does sponsorship work? It is a thing that requires a legal commitment to be with these people for at least 6 months, but one family can't sponsor someone all by themselves. It does take a village. And so we are all offering training for our volunteers. We need a host family. There's a team of support for both the host family and the persons seeking asylum. And we've given you some examples there. Our individual organizations do fundraising, but I will say that we've also done fundraising with Vermont, New Hampshire, ASN. We did a Giving Tuesday, and we thought we might get $10,000. We were able to raise over $15,000 and share it among the groups in Vermont, which was very exciting. And then we always look for pro bono help, mental health, physical health, legal help.
Can I just say that as far as the legal help is concerned, we have been told and we know that if an asylum seeker is here by themselves or with their family and they have no legal help, their chances of actually persuading an immigration court that they should get asylum is close to none. And so we are very dependent on getting legal help, usually pro bono legal help for these people. And it's quite a long process because when they come here, as Ellen said, they cannot work initially, even though they are here legally when they've passed their credible fear interview. They're not allowed to work until they get a temporary work permit, and that can take a year. And so the attorney has to help with that. And then there are lots of documents and things that have to be helped with. And so it is a complex process. And just to add what Ellen said about money, before you can consider hosting an asylum seeker, you have to raise about $8,000. And so both of our groups have, our group is a combination of church and local people. And we have been able to do that. And we are close to having an asylum seeker come to Randolph.
You. So the next couple of slides, some of the issues are trauma, cultural differences, and power. As Wendy mentioned, the traumas are huge that they come from. And think about if you had to leave your country, it had to be some horrible thing that would make you do that. So they come here looking for our help, but there are all kinds of cultural differences, which I was a Spanish teacher and I used to have fun going through those things with the kids. I won't do it now, but you'd be amazed at some of the things we take for granted that don't happen in other countries. Power. power of military on the border or the border patrol, they see the people coming across, see them as military. Power also comes in the form of our privilege. So all of the things that we're doing to think about racism is a very strong sense of power over the people who are coming. That's how they see it. The white people that are coming, that are going to help them, have all the power. And that's something that we need to work very hard to make partnerships. I don't know if you know what's going on in Rutland. We've had a lot of problems with racist issues here. But all of the things in the slide are things that we need to think about working on getting rid of the idea of power, but sharing support. So what can you do, seeing as we're almost out of time? I would invite you to look at these questions and think about what you or others around you can do to be supportive of people coming to the US seeking asylum. And I would say that if you want to contact us, I'm pretty sure our emails have been shared. And
Yeah.
Wendy and I can both give you all kinds of information about groups near you, including us. Anything?
And there are lots of different kinds of volunteering. I mean, like driving someone to go shopping or taking someone to the doctor or things like that. We have had to, another things that we need people to do is contact the local school and say, here is what is happening here. We have a child coming into this town and they are going to need a lot of help. And the same with adults, of course, we're dealing with language and we have to get support for their trauma and support for their language, support for them to know how to live in a completely different community. So there are lots and lots of different ways that you can help. And we hope that you will be motivated to reach out to one of the groups that are already in existence in Vermont, or maybe even start one in your community. We would be very happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation, this beautiful slideshow. We're moving into our section on racial justice activities, and our first presenter is Sandy Soho from Old South Church in Windsor.
Hi, thank you. Let me see if I can grab my screen that I want to share. And first off, I just want to say how humbled I am by everything that everybody else is doing around the state. I feel like the work that we're doing with our Vigil is the first step in a long process of really developing our pillar of racial justice at Old South Church. My name is Sandy Soho. I'm a member of Old South Church, and our Vigil started back right after the murder of George Floyd. My daughter was home from college because of COVID, and she had been in touch with some friends who are out in Minnesota who were doing very active work sort of on the streets and getting very much involved. And she was feeling frustrated that she was home in Windsor, Vermont, and not feeling like we could do anything. So we had a conversation about it. And we talked about the possibility of at least standing in solidarity with the people across the country. So she took it upon herself to organize the first vigil that we held, which was on June 3rd. For an hour from 5:30 to 6:30, we had 50 people that took turns standing in silence for 15 minutes, holding signs in support of racial equality and social justice. And as you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We had everybody distanced appropriately. We had little markers on the steps where they could stand, and we had to hold back the number of people because we were trying to be respectful of the pandemic. But we also had a number of people that were along the sides of the street, and at each of the 15-minute points, we rang the church bell 9 times for the number of minutes that George Floyd was held down. So we did this first vigil, and it was kind of like, okay, so we've done the vigil. And then the people that were involved that stood said, we need to do this again. And it's like, okay, how often should we do this? And it's, well, let's do it again in 2 weeks. So we did it again. And for that one, we decided it would be one session of people from 6 to 6:30 on Wednesday. And we'd ring the church bell at the beginning 9 times and ring it at the end to begin and to start it and finish it. And it developed into a desire to keep it going. So we've held a weekly vigil on the steps of Old South Church from that point on. We did put it on hold for the time right around the middle of November when COVID cases started rising, and it felt like we needed to be more careful. But we did pick it back up. I think we started back up in the middle of March. And I think one of the components of the vigil that I really like is the ringing of the bell at the beginning and at the end. We've had a couple of occasions where when the bell rang, a minute or two later, we'd have people drive up because they heard the bell and thought, oh, the vigil's tonight. And we usually have about probably 8 to 12 people that have been steadily showing up. It's been a few less since we started up in March, but I have a feeling once people get vaccinated and they feel more comfortable getting out, that we'll be back up to our numbers again. And we know that when people around town hear the bell, they're thinking about racial justice. So I feel like it's an interesting way to spread the word about what we're doing, and it's just by the sound of the bells. In addition to our weekly vigil, during the summer, we held a discussion after the vigil with the group that was there to figure out what we could do in terms of an action step, knowing that the vigil itself is an act of solidarity, but we feel like there's definitely more that needs to be done within our community. At a point last summer in August 14th, we organized the showing of the film 13th at the Farmers Exchange in Windsor, which is a building that hosts community events. We didn't hold it inside, it was an outdoor screening. And then the following week, we held a discussion about that, the film. We also wanted to do a book discussion, but we didn't want to do it on our own because we also feel like all of this is about the community. And thinking about who in the town does things with books, we approached the librarian in town, and she was very receptive to starting up a racial justice book discussion group. So beginning in November, we've been, I think we've read 4 books at this point. And the last one that we read, I highly recommend. It's called The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. And it opened my eyes to the migration that happened and the impact of coming north and how everything wasn't as great in the north as we thought it was. And we also had Cynthia Bittinger, who's a Vermont author, come in and do a discussion of her book. It's entitled Vermont Women, African Americans, and Native Americans Out of the Shadows of History. And again, that was eye-opening because it was specifically related to the experience of these people in Vermont. Let me see, what else did I want to tell you about? Oh, then one of the things that we've started to do is take advantage of some of the national UCC events that have been taking place. I personally attended a 7-week-long course that was developed by Reverend Dr. Velda Love, the Minister of Racial Justice at the UCC National Office. And the session was entitled Sacred Conversations to End Racism. And I have to tell you that my entire view of what I learned as history shifted upside down. That it was very eye-opening and impactful to me, so much so that at this point I'm now in a 1-year course to become a facilitator for this the 7-week course, and hopefully we'll be able to bring it to our area when I'm done with that, with the training. The other thing that our church did during Advent, we participated in a series of Zoom sessions that were organized by the Justice and Local Church Ministries National Office, entitled Faith-Based Organizing Training for Justice. And those sessions were held on Sundays in Advent, and then we would have a local debrief session for Old South on the Wednesday following each session. In addition to these activities, so these are our first steps in this journey, and we're really trying to establish a pillar of social justice within our church. And over the next couple months, what we're hoping to do is really flesh out the structure for that and figure out ways that we can have more discussions, deeper discussions with people that don't always see eye to eye. And one of the members of Old South, who has been working on developing the structure, just participated in a program that is organized by a group called Braver Angels. And I don't know if anybody else knows about this group, but from their website, I got Braver Angels is a citizen organization developed to bring together liberals and conservatives, not to find compromise, but to understand each other beyond stereotypes, and to form community alliances and reduce polarizing rhetoric. And she participates. They have one-on-one sessions where they team you up with someone who is from sort of the opposite side of your thinking. And Rhoda did her first session with someone last week, and she said it was really well organized. They provide a framework for the conversation that you're going to have and some guidelines, but it's really meant to find those places that we think alike and build on those parts of who we are. The other thing that we've found, I think, being on the steps has been helpful to show the town who we are. And through that, we're learning about activities that we can be involved in town. Our select board has created a Jedi Subcommittee. Jedi stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And they're really looking for ways to develop more of a community spirit around those things. And in addition to that, through the book club that we have, we got an email from a member of our school board, and the school board next Monday is, where do I have my little information about it? They're going to be talking about an anti-racism and equity policy, and they encouraged participation in that conversation. So I feel like being on the steps is an important place for us to be right now, and it's going to move us forward. I did have one other, I want to show you the video that we did. Is it this
Quick,
one?
Sandy, we're running out of time. Is it?
Okay. The video is 10 seconds,
Oh.
if I can find it. Wait. Oh, it's on the wrong, wait, can I move it over here? No, that's not going to work. All right. Anyway, it was a happy birthday to Alexander Twilight video that we were asked to participate in. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sandy. You can put the link to the video in the chat if you want.
It's not it's just a little video that was on my phone.
All right. Thanks so much.
All righty.
Paul Ayer from Williston is next.
Thank you. And I echo the words that Sandra used as she preceded me, as she talked about how humbling it is to make a presentation when you've heard all the wonderful things that other churches are already doing. But I will be happy to share with you a bit about what Wilson Federated Church has been about. And so, of course, it was the death of George Floyd last year that was the catalyst for our congregation, as it was, I suspect, for many of yours, to really focus in an intentional way on racism, and not only racism in society, but of course, racism within ourselves. And we've gone about that in a few ways that I'll briefly share with you. Of course, in the weeks following George Floyd's death, I certainly devoted sermon time to that topic, to the topic of racism and racism within ourselves, as well as in society. And that I know has been a consistent theme, I'm sure, for many of the sermons preached in many of your churches throughout the last year. Then we also began to just need to advance the slide, and pardon me as I try to do that. Here, I'm sorry, there we go. So another way that, of course, we have offered a public witness on this topic has been to put in place a Black Lives Matter flag on the church lawn. In June of last year, our congregation, our annual meeting, voted to take this step, and that lawn sign remains in place to this day. And on the day that was put in place, June 20th of last year, we rang the church bell for 8 minutes and 45 seconds to parallel the time that we understood George Floyd's neck was pinned to the ground by Derek Chauvin's knee. But more than that very important public witness, we have also engaged in some regular and in-depth conversations that we've held weekly on the topic of racism. And these conversations take place on each Thursday. As it happened during the pandemic, we had, in fact, been gathering via Zoom on Thursdays to have a congregational check-in to just see how folks were doing. At first, those were very well attended, but as the weather got warmer and the days got longer, participation in those weekly check-ins had started to wane. But then, with our attention riveted on the issue of race as a result of George Floyd's death, those weekly conversations that had been just congregational check-ins, see how folks were doing in the COVID context. Now those conversations became focused upon how we respond to racism. And we have two conversations, one at 4 o'clock, one at 8 o'clock, and typically different folks attend those different time slots. There's a bit of an overlap between the two. And initially the attendance came almost exclusively from our own congregation, but I was certainly eager to broaden that conversation given the importance of the topic. And so at the local Rotary Club meeting via Zoom, Rotary being a group of which I am a member, I let my colleagues in that setting, the fellow Rotarians, know that we were holding these conversations and invite people to join. And sure enough, some folks started to come. And that group included the lead principal of the local schools, included the chair, the person who's now the chair of the local school board, the director of the local community justice center, and others. And it was their participation obviously enriched the conversation. They brought significant perspective to those discussions, and their ongoing participation certainly was validation that these conversations were meaningful, that they were worth that kind of ongoing commitment that is required if we're going to tackle an issue as significant as racism. In fact, I knew that we had really, we must have really been tackling the issue in a way that these folks found meaningful when one evening the principal and the community justice center director each brought a family member to our Zoom conversation. Then we knew that there was some real ongoing interest and commitment to this weekly conversation. The format that we follow is to have an opening prayer followed by a 10 to 15 minute discussion starter. And for the discussion starter, typically I use an excerpt from a broadcast or a podcast. Very often it will be perhaps a public radio interview with a noted author or activist, Isabel Wilkerson, Robin DiAngelo, Resma Menitum, who authored My Grandmother's Hands. Many of the other authors that I know, so many of you are reading and are studying. We have used those, and typically the excerpt would be about 10 minutes long, so that we'd have then considerable, maybe 15, but in that range. So we'd have considerable time then for the discussion that follows. Let me back up just a moment. I'll come back to Reggie in a moment. The discussions typically last for the total time, including the discussion starter and the conversation that follows, typically lasts an hour and a half. That's what we set aside. We found that an hour was really too brief. We were in many ways just beginning to dig deeply into the topic, and new perspectives were just being offered as we were moving forward at 1 hour. So an hour and a half we found was the right time frame. And let me say this about the use of the discussion starter. So I know there have been all sorts of very meaningful book groups gathered across the state in many of your churches, again, exploring the works of some of these very same authors. One advantage of the discussion starter model is that it then removes the barrier to entry that a book might represent, by which I mean that some of our discussion participants have very busy schedules. If there was the expectation that they would have read or come to the discussion having read certain chapters in the book Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, we may or may not get those folks into the conversation. If they did show up, they would be operating at a disadvantage because they would not have done their homework, right? They would not have read those chapters, read the book. But by using an excerpt from a broadcast or podcast, and then we're all starting at the same place. We'll all have heard that same information. Now, some of our folks will have read that author and read more deeply, and they can bring those perspectives into the conversation. But we all have this baseline of information and insight from that particular author that then provides the springboard for further conversation. So one specific outgrowth of these conversations, in addition to what we trust has been an increased awareness and enlightenment and commitment on the part of each participant, but one specific community outgrowth was an event where one of our church members, this African-American member of our Wilson congregation, Reg Melrose, stepped into his Civil War reenactor uniform and took us to a local cemetery where is buried, and you can see Reg standing next to the gravesite of Newell Langley, who was an African-American Civil War soldier from Vermont, buried in Williston. And Reg Melrose of our congregation has done extensive research about African-Americans from Vermont who served in the Civil War. And so it brought that wealth of information for us. And because Reg had that information and was so willing to share it, we then offered this community event where we invited the community to join us at the cemetery. So there was an article in the local newspaper, in the local Front Porch Forum, and there was a strong turnout from the community as well as from our congregation for Reg's presentation. Of course, because it was outdoors, this happened in September of last year. Because it was outdoors, people wore masks, except for Reg because he was our presenter, but the rest of us were wearing masks. So the COVID protocols were in place, but we had the chance to learn about a piece of Vermont history, specifically Black Vermont history, that was new to so many of us and so many in our community. And we saw that as a small but important step to increase our awareness of the BIPOC community in Vermont and in Williston. And we were so pleased to celebrate that piece of local history. And we're so grateful to Reg Melrose for having offered that presentation for us. So just to highlight the way in which our congregation's response to the issue of racism has proceeded over the last year. Of course, it was in May, Memorial Day itself of last year, that George Floyd died. And then I preached on that, addressing the topic of racism the following Sunday and many Sundays thereafter. Then in June, we initiated the weekly conversations about racism, and we put in place the Black Lives Matter flag on the church lawn. And then it was in September, of course, that Reg offered that presentation about African-American Civil War soldier Newell Langley. And it was about that same time that we began to see that increased participation from the wider community, including the participation of the local school pastor, school principal, the chair of the local school board, and the like. And as again, things began to snowball a bit. I was subsequently invited to serve on a newly created Williston Racial Equity Partners Group that is constituted by the Williston Select Board to look at ways in which our community can address, our community broadly speaking, the town itself can address issues related to racism. And additional opportunities to engage the wider community have emerged even since then. And I think that there might be some conclusions we can draw from that. And one of them, I think, is this, that because the congregation has demonstrated this continued commitment week in and week out to confront racism and to confront it both within society and within ourselves, that has sent a signal to the community. It has, I think, dramatized for the community that what happens in church or what happens within the congregation can be profoundly relevant. People from the wider community took notice, and many of them began to connect with our congregation. There's one participant. This person came by way of Rotary, who has joined us in our online worship, or rather joined us in our online conversations about racism, and soon began to join us in our online worship on Sunday mornings, and then really began to feel like our community was her community, our community of faith became hers. So much so that on Super Bowl Sunday, when there was a video during our online worship service of the Wilson Federated Youth promoting the Super Bowl of Caring, as it happened, I'm sure, in many of your churches as well, the youth promoting the Super Bowl of Caring on Super Bowl Sunday. In the chat section of Facebook, where we live stream our worship services, this person, who has never set foot in our sanctuary for worship service, but has connected to our congregation through the weekly conversations on race, and now through our online worship, that this person said in the chat section of Facebook, "Aren't our youth great? Aren't our youth great?" And so there's the sense of connection that has emerged, growing out of the commitment that our congregation has demonstrated on this very crucial issue. I would be happy to answer further questions. My contact information appears there. You see my email address. Again, very honored to talk about what Wilson Federated Church has been doing on this topic. I know so many of you have been addressing this issue in such creative and important ways. So I'm happy to be part of the dialogue. Thank you so much.
Paul. Thank you. We're going to move on to Mark Blank from Bennington. It's clear to me that we're going to go over our time.
No, we're not, because I'm going to scrap my presentation because we already have such limited time between this and in our evening session. So I just want to real quick let Heidi and Pam get ready, because it's going to be your turn. We've all friends, it's good to be with you. I'm the pastor of Second Congregational Church in Bennington, and I was going to talk to you about something that we've incorporated into our worship service, but if you're really that curious, you can check it out online on YouTube. Search for Second Congregational Church Bennington. Really what I want to do right now with you is that acknowledge that we've all been on Zoom for like 7 hours already today. And so our attention we've had lots of information thrown at us, so our attention can, and I know mine is. So I want to invite you to do something with me and just shake your hands, shake your hands, shake your hands, clap them real hard, real fast. And make funny faces. And breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. And rest and know that you are beloved children of God, created in the divine image and loved beyond all measure. And with that, I'll hand it over to Heidi and Pam.
Thank you, Mark. I do want to say that what Mark is doing at his church is happening during the worship service, which is different than what we've been hearing. So please do check it out.
Okay, I can't see us. Can you see us?
We can.
Okay, can you see both of us? Because I can't see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, I'm Heidi and this is Pam.
Hello.
And we're members of the outreach ministry of the Norwich Congregational Church. And after the George Floyd murder, we were all pretty concerned about the Black Lives racial issues embroiling our country. And we put the Black Lives Matter sign up in front of the church where it still stands. And we did a few other things.
Yeah, the couple of other witnessing things that we did in the course of the summer and an ongoing piece is we worked with a group of folks to create a COVID-free caravan for racial justice. We had a number of elderly citizens that felt passionate about this issue. They wanted to stand up, but it was still too early in the pandemic. So we created a car caravan. And it was amazing. There were 35 cars. It led all the way through Norwich, about 20 miles, people on the streets, kids cheering everyone on, and that was great. And the other thing that we've done, Norwich is a small community, and our across the green from the Norwich Congregational Church is the St. Barnabas Episcopal Church, and they do a weekly, first Sunday of the month, silent vigil, where they ring the bell and there are people on the green, and we've teamed with them. And so for a silent vigil and a tolling of the bells for racial justice.
So, however, one thing that we were concerned about was that we needed to talk, and we needed something to motivate us to come together as a church or as an outreach ministry. And I just happened to have a friend share something, which I'm going to have somebody screen share in a minute. You don't need to do it yet, but it's a discussion guide. And it was, and I'm going to show you a few pages of it in a minute, but it was so amazing that all of us in the outreach committee said, yes, let's share this. However, none of us, we felt, were the appropriate people to lead the discussion. And we've gone through a few interim ministers lately, so we were kind of on our own. And so this discussion guide, I guess you can put it up now, is perfect. And this, don't try to write, I'm going to show you an easy way to get to it later, so don't feel like you have to write something down. Unfortunately, I don't think, can you turn the page? I don't think that, oh, you can't see a thing. Okay. I can't see a thing. I doubt anybody else can. But the woman on the left's name is Morgan Hall. And even though a friend of mine in New York State said, my friend Morgan Hall did this discussion guide, and it's about 60 pages. I discovered inadvertently that Morgan Hall had grown up in Hampshire and was friends of my children. So that was really interesting. She, after the Floyd murder, she has she's biracial, and her children, and she's married to a white man, so her children are lighter. And apparently they asked her, why are people asking if you're our nanny? And it raised a lot of questions for her, which you'll see in this section you can't read. But in the table of contents, she just went over all sorts of things that you can see there: terms, bias, stereotypes, racism. And so I got in touch with her and I said, can you meet with us for a Zoom discussion of this? Turns out she's in California and she's got 3 little kids. And she said, well, I can pop in and out, but why don't you call my sister? And her sister is, her name is Bonnie Walker, and she's a facilitator. She actually is a diversity, inclusion, and an equity coordinator in a private school. And she does facilitation. And we fortunately had a fund at our church so that we were able to pay her. And we did 4 sessions, and she would give us homework ahead of time each session. And we opened it up to our church and friends and family. So we had about 30 people sign up. And I'd say there were about 20 at each session. Not everybody's free on a Wednesday night. So we spent one whole session talking about implicit bias. And Bonnie asked us to share personal experiences we had. There was a lot of sharing that we realized that we all have a lot to learn and that we all do have bias. And she said, yes, everybody has some kind of bias. We learned a lot about bias. The next week we talked about stereotypes, and the following week, and this was really important, microaggressions, which was a new word to me, but there was homework to read. There was, I don't know how much more of that you can see. It was just eye-opening, and we learned from each other. And one of our homeworks was, if you can take that away and show the other link. Morgan has a website called Morgan's Hallway. And if you go online and type in Morgan's Hallway, it will come up. And I'm kind of hoping it'll come up there. But if it doesn't, it includes the link to the discussion guide. And it also includes people's stories. She has an incredible network of people who shared stories, some Black, some white, some people talking about how they reacted when somebody said the N-word, for instance, and they were torn with guilt because they didn't act fast enough. And we all wonder, what can we do if we hear somebody say something that is, and this is the guest room that you can go into, but you can also find her, and the guest room is different people's stories, and they're fascinating. And we talked a lot about that. And one thing I had said to Bonnie in advance is, what can we do in our church? We're a white church in a white community, and we'd like to be more diverse, but that's really hard in the upper valley of New Hampshire, in Vermont. And she actually gave us a lot of suggestions, just so much great material, which Morgan said that she would, she's happy to share anything that she had, and the same with Bonnie. So if you'd like to start a discussion group in your church, those resources are really rich. And toward the end, it also includes books that are great links. I'm not going to go into too many more details. What did I forget here? So.
I don't think you forgot anything. I will say that the people power, the curriculum is all digital, and she has just incredible resources embedded within the curriculum. So it was an invaluable class, and her resources are beautifully written and thoughtful. And then in addition, she just has incredible resources throughout.
We learned a lot, and I think just about everybody who is a member of the church. There were some people outside the church who also joined us, but everyone wants to continue the discussion. And the only regret we have, I think, is that it was on Zoom. On the other hand, Bonnie lives in Massachusetts. We probably wouldn't be able to see her 4 weeks in a row in the evening without Zoom. So,
So how do we get the information to folks?
If my email is in the
chat.
In the chat, thank you, that's the word. If you would like, I can make a packet and send it out to people, and just an incredible number of links and conversation starters. And I mean, Morgan's brilliant, and Bonnie is brilliant, and they both, they shared a lot about their lives growing up in a white community, and how they wish some things were different, and how they, when people touched their hair, why should they have reacted differently, or they wish they'd reacted differently. There's just so much to think about, and it was a good discussion time for our church, and I'm sure we'll continue.
Thank you, Heidi and Pam. Thank you. We do. I have those links, and if anybody knows my email address, they can email me for those. Also, Heidi and Pam's Heidi's address is actually in the chat there. Okay, hpwebster1@gmail.com. Thank you so much. So we have our last main presentation is Alyssa, Jonk, and Ken White from the Burlington churches, and happy to see you guys. I know you asked if we could have you on. There we go. Beautiful. Take it away, kids.
Thank you. So Ken and I had a bit of an over-under going on how many folks would be left at this point. And let's just say we both lost. You guys are great for hanging in there with us. I'm Alyssa. I'm the pastor at the First Congregational Church here in Burlington, Vermont. I'm here with Ken, the pastor at College Street, and we're just going to talk a little bit briefly about some of the work that our congregations have been doing together around this. Back when COVID hit, I think we all found ourselves in a similar spot, and that it was hard to escape, right? It's a lot of the pain that was going on, a lot of the news cycle, and what a great opportunity that's been to really dig into some of this stuff. And so we, like so many that we've heard, started our book groups. At First Church, it started with the white privilege curriculum that the UCC has put out, which is a great starting point really for understanding, where do we start with this? And, Dorhauer opens up with a quote by Jesus, those who have eyes to see, and that's the primary challenge of that text, is to really see where your privilege takes you, and how it affects your soul and what the soul work is. And that's soul work for both of us. And we both found that our congregations were doing this. We were doing this side to side. And so we decided to come together and collaborate on that. So Ken, do you want to take it up there on some of the work that we were doing to collaborate?
Sure. So, we started we were in different places with our different communities. So we started reading some things together, and we started sharing some of the materials that we were reading. I remember one of the books, the book we worked on at College Street was Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be Anti-Racist. A number of you have read that as well. And in the last chapter, there was a paragraph that really caught my eye that I wanted to share with y'all. I won't read the whole paragraph. I'm actually putting a paraphrase of the paragraph in the chat. The paragraph begins with, "Admit racial inequity is a problem of bad policy, not of bad people," which is a really important starting point. And then he just lists out, identify where the inequity is, investigate, do research into what the policy is, invent or find an anti-racist policy, identify who it is that can enact that policy, educate the people around you, and push for that anti-racist policy, and deploy all the anti-racist power that we have, which is, as we're hearing today, a lot, to institute that policy, monitor it closely to make sure that the forces of racism within and around us don't undermine that, and when you fail, start over and figure out how to learn from that, how to do it better. And I read that and I was struck by, oh, I know where I've heard this before. I've heard this in Vermont Interfaith Action, because this is the process that VIA uses in all of our research groups. So we got together around that.
Right. Yeah. And VIA has been great for that, right? And it's brought us together. And the first thing that, Debbie really, when she was meeting with us, reminded us is that, there are other people who have done this work, right? And that's where a lot of these books and readings that you all are talking about too are leading us, right? That we're not the first people to do this work. And in a lot of ways, we need to get out of our own way, right? As Dorhauer put it, the final work for us should be to commit to reducing the impact of our privilege that it has on creating injustice and inequity. So we thought we'd look to some of the other leaders in the state, particularly some of the Black or Indigenous leaders in the state who are already doing this work. One of the folks that we have worked closely with in this process is Mark Hughes, who's the leader of the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance. He's done a lot of work in the state in a lot of different arenas, but right now he's working really across party lines to think about 7 different factors. His group is thinking about 7 different factors as it relates to Black wellness, in Vermont. And he's identified these 7 things that have become even more clear to his organization and its members throughout the past year. They need to focus on culture, Black culture. How do you lift it up? How do we allow it to thrive here? Safety and security. What does that look like in Vermont? Youth and child development. What does that look like? How do we cause flourishing? Housing and land access, educational opportunities, income and wealth disparities, and health services. So, he met with us, he met with some of our folks who were our initial interested parties, and we took that and we did some listening sessions, which is the VIA process, right? We went back to our congregations and we said, okay, what are you hearing? What of this makes you passionate? What brings something up? What causes resistance in you that we need to talk about more, right? And from that, we really narrowed it down into two areas, which were kind of the economic opportunities, which are twofold, Black business, Black economic opportunities, and home ownership. And that's one that has been a particularly big one for First Church, as we see it within our own congregation, right? The unequal access to housing of our Black members as compared to our white members. So the economic opportunities was really interesting to us. And then the other one is really, it's the one that's been predominant, which is public safety. What does that look like? How do we reimagine public safety? How do we bring folks to the table around that? So we've done, some early research meetings, and here again, VIA has been great. Debbie is really well connected to folks in the state and is able to get us in front of the people who are doing this research, because we're not creating here, right? We are learning from and learning how to leverage our power to come alongside with. So we have met with leaders from the Vermont Business for Social Responsibility board. We've met with Curtis Reed, who heads the Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Diversity. We've met with members of the Vermont Racial Equity Panel and UVM professors that work around issues of public safety. We've worked with street outreach folks. We have worked with folks who do housing work. So we've really done a lot of the initial research meetings. And that's where we are now at this point in terms of trying to figure out, how do we fit in? How do we leverage our power? What can we learn? And where can we go? Is that how you would put it, Ken?
Yeah. And one of the questions that I've had for myself early on that Debbie helped me with, but I've also thought through a good bit, and I know Alyssa's thought about it, is what is it that our faith brings to the table that makes this a different conversation than a social group or a book club at the library or an activist group, all of which are very important. But what is it uniquely about our tradition that can help in this matter. I think there are a number of things, but some of the ones that I've found helpful are, as Debbie mentioned, 2 Corinthians, we have been given a ministry of reconciliation, right? This is what we're about, but we're not reconciling like, let's make white supremacy and equity somehow reconcile. That's not what this is about, because that's connected with repentance, right? That's something else that we have a language for, we have an understanding of repentance. And we have this combination of this ancient language, which can point us to this very real experience of the demon of white supremacy that has infested us, that has taken root in our hearts without our permission, without our, we didn't give it a say-so, because it happened before we were old enough to know it was doing it. But we have this ancient language, but also this way of looking forward into not just a tweak or a little bitty change, but into this new way of being that we believe will happen, that there will be a day when all of us are able to sit under our own fig trees and be unafraid. And so I invite you to ponder that question. What is it that as people of faith, we have to offer to this conversation, as well as all the ways in which I need to repent and I need to be freed of the oppression of white supremacy that has taken root in my life.
Yeah, just today, I had a youth text me who is just in knots trying to figure out what justice means, right? And that's just this word that has been thrown around so much, really, in the past, year, 5 years certainly, but think about the past month. Think about the past month alone as we've looked at the Chauvin trial, and she does not have any understanding of what justice was done now, right? And it was because we were not talking about the same thing, right? We're not talking about that Zedek, that Reverend Blackman was preaching about this morning, right? The idea of God's justice being something that's a restorative principle, that we're focused on the oppressed. That was so unfamiliar to her in a lot of ways, right? Because we've come to make it mean an eye for an eye. That's how she thought of it, right? So there is something fundamental in the language and the way we approach this work that I think is really important for the conversation. And for me, I think it's been really important to do this with other congregations too, right? We see better, for those who have eyes to see, we see better in community, right? We hold ourselves accountable better in communities. So that's been one of the main values, I think, for me in the way that we've gone about this work, Ken, is the partnership between our church and then the wider community, other churches who have decided to join in with us in this work, right?
Right. We have Christ Church Presbyterian and Youth Society and All Souls, and there's room for more. So
yeah.
Thank you so much. Good to get to share this with y'all.
All right. Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you very much, you two. I want to say thank you to everybody. It's just amazingly impressive what's going on in our churches, and humbling too. Betty and Bev and I want to do a tribute to John Nutting. We have that all ready. But we think
Teresa.
Am I muted? Yes.
Teresa.
Yes.
Can I just say a word about the Department of Justice and Witness venture? Or thought this would be a good time to do that. I won't take long because it's been a wonderful, rich palette of presentations. But we wanted to let you all know that the Department of Justice and Witness has also really been taking seriously the challenge of racial justice. And we've had a couple of Zoom meetings over the course of the last couple of months. And I notice probably 8 or 10 of you from those meetings have been on this meeting today. So many of you know what I'm talking about already. But our intention is to provide a place for both conversation about racial justice among folks from different congregations, but also to seed a task force that will be available to be a resource for various congregations that are wanting to do more with this. And you all have had such inspiring stories and examples. One of the basic ideas that came out of our conversation was that there are many different approaches to racial justice, that we talked about the importance of a multi-pronged approach, and that everything from book groups to witnesses to community connections to justice actions and many more that you all have talked about. And so we want to be a focus for this conversation in the conference. And so if people are interested in either joining on our Zooms that are occasional, we have between 15 and 20 people each time so far. You can either contact me, Fred Taylor, and I'll put my email in the chat, or Jackie Lengelbach at the conference office. If you could contact Jackie, if that's okay with Jackie, to have people be in touch with you, and you can put them in touch with us. But we really want to also provide resources for people. And I think a great first step would be, for those of you who have made presentations today, it would be wonderful if you could provide to us some of the resources that you found most useful in terms of books and films and activities. So just wanted to make a quick heads up on that. And I'll be saying more about that in a speak out tonight in a little more detail. So you'll probably be there for that, but I just wanted to follow up with these wonderful racial justice presentations. So, okay.
I think what we're going to do is we're going to do our John Nutting tribute after we sing "Let There Be Peace on Earth." So those of you who have been to the breakfast know that we end that way. I'm going to stand up and put my hands out and virtually hold your hands. And at the end, we lift them up like that. And after that, for anyone who would like to stay, Betty and Bev and I have a little bit of a tribute to John Nutting. So, but I'm sure that a lot of you will have to go, and we won't hold that against you. So let's readjust our screens here and get on our feet, those of you who would like to, and end this wonderful event the way we always do, singing "Let There Be Peace on Earth." I'll sing it unmuted. You all drown me out singing it at home, okay? And use whatever words you're used to using. Okay, here we go. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With God, our Creator, we're one family. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow, to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Amen. If you have to leave, do so, and we'll see you a little bit later in the meeting. If you'd like to stay and hear about John Nutting and actually hear him sing about laying down in Lamoille County, which is what he did a year ago, please stick with us. We've got a few pictures. We wanted to show some pictures. Fred's going to do that. And in one of those pictures, you'll catch a glimpse of Ramona, John's wife of 60 years who died in 2018. It's hard to imagine John's ministry, what it would have been without Ramona as his right-hand gal. She was a lovely, friendly, caring, humble Vermonter who didn't give a hoot about being in the limelight. And let's see, we have those there. We just have a few pictures to start with. This is Camp About Face at Bethany Birch's. You'll hear more about that from Betty and Bev. And what else do we have? Oh, it's a slideshow. I think there's a few seconds on each picture. And Betty and Bev, you should unmute yourselves here. That's Betty Addison on the left. I think this is another picture. And there's Ramona, two people away from John, also at camp. During the talent show, the camp talent show, I'm sure. And Bev is going to tell you about that picture, a sketch that John did. He was a multi-talented guy. The Reverend John Nutting died in Morrisville on June 10th, 2020 at age 88. Originally from Duluth, Minnesota, he came to Vermont in 1954 as a summer pastor while attending Yale Divinity School. Once ordained, he served churches in Hyde Park and North Hyde Park. And in 1966, John became the minister of mission of the Vermont Conference United Church of Christ, a position he held for 30 years. It is in the context of John's statewide mission work that many of us knew, admired, and were supported and inspired by him. He traveled Vermont with his smile, his hugs, his songs, and love for all people. He calmly, respectfully, and boldly spoke gospel truth to power, advocating for social, economic, and political justice for marginalized or exploited groups of people, including low-income Vermonters, Native American tribes, and victims of wars in Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Bosnia. John served dozens of Vermont nonprofit organizations. Many of us knew him well from his work with the Vermont Low-Income Advocacy Council, with the Bethany Birch's Camp About Face for low-income families, and from his attendance, of course, at the Peacemakers Breakfasts, of which he was a founder. The best way to talk about John is through stories. I've got a few, but I'm only going to tell one, I think. It took place in 1990 when on one Sunday he was visiting Bethany Church, which is where I am right now. And he announced during worship that he was organizing a second Vermont Conference pilgrimage to Central America to see what progress had been made in Nicaragua since the 1986 Witness for Peace trip that he was on. And he was going to tack on a few days in El Salvador since it was also a big concern of U.S. peacemakers. Well, at that time, I was really interested in the mission field and social justice and global issues, but because of parenting and work, I had not had a chance to see much of the world at all. After church, after we got home, my husband turned to me and he said, "Oh, by the way, I signed you up for that trip." What a gift it was to me and consequently to Bethany Church, which ended up forming a partnership with a village in El Salvador that is still thriving 30 years later. I'm going to turn this over to Bev, skip my other stories and turn it over to Bev now. Bev, you want to unmute yourself?
There we go.
There you go.
I'm okay. You saw that the photos, and one of the photos was a pencil drawing that was done by John on June 12th, 1982. We marched for peace in New York City and we traveled on a chartered bus leaving the night before. We marched all day, traveled home that night to return just before dawn. The drawing is of a bread and puppet, huge puppet that marched near us during the day. John, Charles Chamberlain, and I walked together all day, stopped on our way back to the bus to have a cup of coffee with, as I remember, John's suggestion of a little bit of Bailey's Irish cream. That was my first, but not my last addition of Bailey's Irish cream to my coffee. John worked on the drawing as we drank our coffee, and he finished it on the bus on the ride home, and it became mine, a treasured possession. For nearly all of John's ministry with the Vermont Conference, he faithfully and passionately supported Vermont Low-Income Advocacy Council, VILIAC it's called, and he loved its people, as you could see in the pictures.
VILIAC works on important issues that affect low-income Vermonters, including affordable housing, healthcare, childcare, and issues of economic justice. Recently, VILIAC priorities have focused on the impact of the COVID pandemic on low-income Vermonters. The organization is led by a dedicated lobbyist, Karen Lafayette, who works with the legislature on budget and policy initiatives and decisions that affect low-income Vermonters. John worked closely with the lobbyist and the legislator, fighting, albeit peacefully, for the justice low-income Vermonters deserve. At John's retirement gathering that we had at North Hyde Park, a local church pastor told of calling John to get some support and advice because she was having trouble with her congregation. She told him her story, and his response was, "You've just gotta love them." She said it was the best advice she could have received. It served her well over the years, and I can say the same. I think that's how John lived his life. Whoever the players, whatever the circumstances, John found a way to just love them. No judgment, often with humor, and always, always with love. That was the John I knew. Betty Edson has some remembrances that she'd like to share.
John influenced my life in positive ways more than anyone but my parents and my husband. To the extent that I have been involved in justice work, all credit goes to John. For so many years, John, on behalf of God and the Vermont Conference, sowed seeds that grew to be effective programs for empowering the unempowered. He gave his life of service to the church, but also throughout the state, building bridges with any and all who sought to make life better for everyone, and constantly and kindly challenging cultural stereotypes, like my resistance way back when to inclusive language. He is a very special child of God. One memory that I have of a Camp About Face is of sitting on the hill at Bethany Birch's with him as we were surrounded by the noise of happy kids and chattering adults of all kinds and sizes and talents, and him shaking his head and saying, "This is what the kingdom of God looks like." He had the ability to gently push people beyond their comfort zone so that their humane understanding expanded. And he gave support and respect to people who so badly needed it. I recall one man who came to camp who had some obvious intellectual challenges, and he was all upset about a sore toe. And darned if John didn't have us all get together and pray for that toe. And he would find jobs at camp for people to do so that they could feel important and know how special they really were. The talent show was a very good example. People being applauded for probably the first time in their life for a not very good poem they had worked hard on, or for a song they sang. Camp was always full of surprises, but as well an acting out of God's kingdom of acceptance and unconditional love.
Rest in peace, John, mentor to all, so many of us, and faithful servant of God.
So we already sang "Let There Be Peace on Earth," and we're gonna close this whole Peacemakers event. And there's still 50 people with us. Thank you for staying on so long. We're gonna close it with John singing. It's a fabulous. If Fred's still with us, so John singing "Lay Me Down" in Lamoille County, which all the places he'd been to in the world was his absolute favorite place in the world. He loved the people of Lamoille County, and here we go.
I went over to Maine looking for a job once, and I found that the people over there thought I was a landholder. Thought I owned a lot of land in Lamoille County. I told them, well, I sure did. And I do. I own a little plot, about 8 foot long and 6 foot wide. That's where I'm going to be buried. It's in the cemetery in Stowe, and it's brooded over by Mount Mansfield and some great, big, tall white pines. Lay me down in Lamoille County where the breezes sashay through the pines. Lay me down in the shadow of Mount Mansfield. Let me rest in a place the frost will never find. I want to be lower gently in the ground, with the word of God proclaimed and friends circled all around. I want to move to that great big home of peace, where the sadness of this world will surely cease. Lay me down in Lamoille County where the breezes sashay through the pines. Lay me down in the shadow of Mount Mansfield. Let me rest in a place the frost will never find. I want to lie near the men who lumbered in the snow, those rugged mountain men who didn't quit at 48 below. I want to join them underneath the sod, playing poker till the roll is called by God. Now there's men who drop the timber up in Cotton Brook, Elmer Russell, my own kin, whose work would fill a book. A dozen others drew the logs to the Burt's front yard after crossing Mansfield Lake when the ice got good and hard. Lay me down in Lamoille County where the breezes sashay through the pines. Lay me down in the shadow of Mount Mansfield. Let me rest in a place the frost will never find. Moving up from Stowe to the county's northern towns, where the farmers went to work digging asbestos from the ground. They drove 100 feet of steel almost every day, but a fall down off the slope meant they didn't get their pay. And now the women stayed at home to keep the fires warm. They carried lots of children who died when they were born. And death came early to these tired mountain mothers. They had to rest for sure when the earth became their cover. Lay me down in Lamoille County where the breezes sashay through the pines. Lay me down in the shadow of Mount Mansfield. Let me rest in a place that the frost will never find. Let me rest in a place that the frost will never find.
Amen. We'll see you all in a little bit. Go have some supper. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, Teresa. Yeah, lovely. Wow.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. Bye-bye, dear Ben.